The shattering moment the clock on my dash read 11:42 p.m. when I pulled into our driveway on Cherry Oak Lane. Another day, another double shift at Riverside General and Miller's Diner. My Ford Taurus, 15 years old and just as tired as I was, groaned as I cut the engine. The early April air had a bite to it as I stepped out, my nurse's scrubs hidden under my waitressing apron. I hadn't had time to change between jobs. I stood there for a moment, looking at our modest two-bedroom home. It wasn't much, but the mortgage was almost paid off. Every shingle on that roof represented hours of overtime, every brick a sacrifice. When Mark left us 8 years ago, he took everything but his responsibilities. Since then, it had been just me and Lily. The windows were still lit, unusual for this hour. Lily was typically asleep by 10 on school nights. As I approached the porch, voices filtered through the partially open living room window. Lily's and another girl's, probably her friend Zoe. I was about to call out when I heard my name. "Your mom's, kinda pathetic though," Zoe said, her voice carrying the casual cruelty teenagers specialize in. I froze, keys in hand. "God, I know. She's such a loser," Lily responded with a laugh that cut through me like winter wind. "Working those trashy jobs, driving that ancient car. It's embarrassing. Seriously. My mom would literally die before she'd wait tables. She's been saying she'll go back to school for years, but she never does anything about it. Just keeps making excuses about money or whatever." Lily's voice dropped to a mocking tone. "One day, honey, things will be different." "Yeah, right." I stood motionless on the front steps, my lungs refusing to draw a breath. The bag of groceries I'd managed to pick up during my 20-minute break between shifts felt suddenly heavy in my hand. "At least your dad sends cool stuff from Seattle," Zoe continued. "When he remembers I exist." Lily snorted. "Still better than Mom, though. She's, obsessed with making everything about her struggles. It's always, 'I work so hard for you,' this, and 'I'm trying my best,' that. Okay, we get it. Your life sucks." The girls dissolved into laughter. I'd faced many painful moments in my 42 years. Mark's betrayal, my mother's slow decline to cancer, the humiliation of having our power cut off that first winter on my own. But nothing had prepared me for this. This was different. This was Lily, my reason for everything. My hand trembled as I slipped the key into the lock. The metallic scrape alerted them. Sudden silence fell inside. I pushed open the door to find Lily and Zoe on our second-hand couch, phones in hand, faces flushed. The smell of the microwave popcorn they'd made hung in the air. "Hey, Mom," Lily said casually, as if she hadn't just driven a stake through my heart. "You're home late." I managed a nod, unable to trust my voice. The girls exchanged glances as I moved mechanically to the kitchen, setting down the grocery bag with deliberate care. "I should probably head home," Zoe said, gathering her backpack. "Thanks for having me over, Mrs. Reynolds." I nodded again, watching as she slipped out the door. Lily busied herself with her phone, avoiding my eyes. "Did you finish your calculus homework?" I asked finally, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. "Yeah, hours ago," she replied, scrolling through Instagram. I wanted to confront her, to ask how she could say such things after everything we'd been through together. Did she truly see me as nothing but a failure? A cautionary tale? Instead, I said, "I'm going to take a shower," and walked woodenly to the bathroom. Under the hot spray, I finally allowed the tears to come. They mixed with the water, endless and silent. I thought of the day Lily was born, how I'd promised her a world of possibilities as I held her tiny form. I recalled the nights I'd spent at her bedside during her asthma attacks, the parent-teacher conferences I'd never missed despite working multiple shifts, the Christmas I'd sold my mother's wedding ring to buy her the laptop she needed for school. For 12 years since Mark left, I'd poured every ounce of strength into creating a stable life for her, into showing her that a woman could stand on her own 2 feet even when the ground beneath her shook, into teaching her that true worth wasn't measured in brand names or social status, but in resilience and integrity. And somehow, despite everything, she saw me as nothing but a loser. When the water ran cold, I stepped out and caught my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were puffy, my hair, Once my pride, now streaked with premature gray, hung limp around my shoulders. My hands were rough from work, nails cut short and practical. When had I started looking so defeated? Was that what Lily saw when she looked at me? Not the strength it took to rebuild our lives from scratch, but only the toll it had taken. I wrapped myself in my threadbare robe and sat on the edge of the bathtub, my mind racing through 1,000 moments. The soccer games I'd cheered at despite bone-deep exhaustion, the homework I'd helped with despite my own interrupted education, the 3 jobs I'd worked the year she needed braces. The hurt began to crystallize into something else, a deep, smoldering determination. I might not have the life I'd dreamed of at 20, but I had never been, would never be a loser. Somewhere along the way, Lily had lost sight of that truth, or perhaps she'd never truly seen it. Tomorrow, I decided, would mark a turning point. If words couldn't show her the reality of sacrifice and strength, perhaps experience could. It was time for Lily to understand what it meant to build a life with nothing but grit and hope as tools. I dried my face, squared my shoulders, and stepped out of the bathroom with a plan forming in my mind. A lifetime of sacrifice sleep evaded me that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, where a small water stain from last winter's leak formed shapes in the darkness. The furnace hummed in the basement, another repair I'd managed myself after watching countless YouTube tutorials. Every corner of this house held memories of my struggle to keep us afloat. Around 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and padded to the small desk in the corner of my bedroom. I pulled out the bottom drawer where I kept our important documents. Beneath our passports and Lily's birth certificate was a worn manila folder labeled Dreams Deferred. Mark had laughed when I'd written that, said I was being melodramatic. Now the label seemed painfully apartment inside were my college acceptance letters from 12 years ago. Boston University, Penn State, even a partial scholarship to Northwestern. They'd arrived just 3 months before I discovered I was pregnant with Lily. Mark and I had been ecstatic about the baby, making plans for our little family. He'd finish his architecture degree while I worked, then I'd go back to school once he was established. Life had other ideas. Mark's father died suddenly that summer, sending him into a depression that deepened after Lily's birth. By the time she was 4, he'd lost 3 jobs and found comfort in bourbon and online gambling. When our savings disappeared along with his wedding ring, I filed for divorce. The day he left for Seattle with his new girlfriend, he'd kissed Lily's forehead and promised to send for her soon. The Christmas presents and birthday checks had become less frequent, then stopped altogether for a while. These days, they were unpredictable, extravagant gifts that made me look stingy by comparison, arriving months late or sometimes unexpectedly, with no rhyme or reason. Beneath the college letters was my nursing school application, filled out but never submitted. I'd been 1 semester away from my LPN when Mark left. The tuition money went to lawyer fees instead. Every few years, I'd update the application, only to set it aside when reality intervened. Lily's asthma treatments, the transmission in the car, the leaking roof. I thumbed through pay stubs from my various jobs through the years. Macy's, Target, Home Depot, the Amazon warehouse where I'd lasted 6 months before my back gave out. Waitressing at Denny's, then Miller's. Finally, my current position as a nursing assistant at Riverside, the closest I'd come to my original dream. Each job change marked a desperate attempt to increase our income while maintaining the flexibility to be there for Lily. Each represented nights and weekends sacrificed, holidays worked for time and a half, feet that ached and a back that never quite recovered. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. The balance was higher than usual, $274.18 in checking, another $5,827.63 in savings. Lily's college fund, such as it was. Not enough for 4 years at a state school, not even close, but enough for community college plus transfer if she kept her grades up. If she got scholarships. If nothing else went catastrophically wrong. Next to the account balance was a transaction history that told the story of our lives in $20 increments. School supplies. Doctors' copays. The monthly transfer to savings that never missed, even when it meant beans for dinner 3 nights running. The occasional movie ticket or ice cream cone, small luxuries that kept us human. I pulled out my old journal, its cover worn from handling. The entries were sporadic, who had time to write regularly, but each one captured a pivotal moment. The first entry after Mark left, my handwriting shaky with fear and rage. The night I'd finally paid off the last of his gambling debts, 3 years later. The day Lily had won the science fair in 5th grade, my heart bursting with pride. And tucked between the pages, photos that tracked our journey. Lily and me at Brighton Beach, her gap-toothed smile gleaming as we built sandcastles during that one budget vacation we'd managed. Lily in her second-hand soccer uniform, proudly displaying the MVP trophy her team had won. The two of us outside this very house the day we moved in, my arm around her shoulders, exhausted but triumphant after the bank finally approved my mortgage. I ran my fingers over these fragments of our history, trying to understand how the gap had widened between my perception of our life together and hers. When had my daughter stopped seeing the victories and started seeing only the struggle? When had she begun measuring our worth against her friends' more affluent families? Perhaps it was my fault. I'd worked so hard to shield her from hardship that maybe I'd inadvertently taught her to be ashamed of it instead. In trying to give her everything, had I failed to give her perspective? The memory surfaced of Mrs. Abernathy, my old high school English teacher. "Sarah," she'd said after reading my college application essay, "you have grit. That's worth more than genius in the long run." I'd carried those words through every setback, clinging to them when despair threatened to pull me under. Had I ever said something similar to Lily? Had I shown her that our circumstances weren't a reflection of our worth, but rather the crucible in which character was formed? I thought of my own mother, who'd raised 3 kids alone after my father died in a construction accident. She'd cleaned houses by day and hospital rooms by night, yet somehow never lost her dignity or her laugh. "Shoulders back, chin up," she'd say. "No one can make you feel small unless you bend." She'd been gone 7 years now, but I felt her presence as strongly as ever in that moment. The eastern sky was beginning to lighten, gray seeping through my thin curtains. Lily would be up in 2 hours for school. I had the early shift at the hospital, then a 6-hour stint at the diner. Today was Thursday. Lily had debate club after school and wouldn't be home until 6. Perfect. I began sorting through the documents, selecting certain ones and setting them aside. Then I opened my laptop again and began to type, a plan taking shape with each keystroke. By dawn, I had what I needed, a roadmap for the journey Lily and I would take together. A journey into our past and, hopefully, toward a new understanding. Not a punishment, but an awakening. I printed out the last page, added it to my folder, and finally laid down for what little rest I could get before the alarm. As I drifted off, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. Tomorrow would mark a turning point for both of us. I just hoped I wasn't too late. The mother's inner turmoil, the hospital corridors seemed longer than usual that morning. I moved through my rounds mechanically, checking IVs, taking vitals, helping patients to the bathroom. My body operated on autopilot while my mind churned with the events of the previous night and the plan I'd set in motion. "Sarah, you all right?" Nancy, the charge nurse, touched my arm as I updated a chart at the station. "You look like you're a million miles away." I managed to smile. "Just tired. Teenager problems." Nancy nodded knowingly. She had 3 kids of her own, all grown now. "Lily giving you grief?" The question hit closer to home than she could know. I hesitated, then simply said, "Just the usual teenage stuff. It'll pass." But would it? That was the question haunting me. The cruel words I'd overheard weren't just typical adolescent rebellion. They reflected a fundamental misunderstanding of who I was and what our life together meant. Somehow, despite my best efforts, I'd failed to communicate the most important lessons. By lunchtime, my phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Parker, Lily's debate coach, confirming she could drop Lily at Miller's Diner at 6:15 instead of taking her home. I'd explained I needed to work late and asked if she could bring Lily to me. She'd agreed readily, another small kindness from the network of parents and teachers who'd helped us through the years. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of mundane tasks and racing thoughts. I kept second-guessing my plan. Was I being too dramatic? Would Lily just roll her eyes and dismiss the whole thing as another example of how extra her mother could be? Was I risking what little connection we still had? But then I'd remember her voice, "She's such a loser," and my resolve would harden. This wasn't about my hurt feelings. It was about correcting a dangerous misconception before Lily carried it into adulthood. Before she learned to measure a person's worth by their income or possessions rather than their character and resilience. I clocked out at 3:30 and drove straight to Miller's, grateful that Diane had agreed to let me start my shift early. She'd raised 4 kids on her own and understood more than most what I was going through. "Take all the time you need tomorrow," she'd said when I'd asked for the day off. "Lord knows you've covered enough shifts for the rest of us." The diner was between lunch and dinner rushes, mostly empty except for a few regulars nursing coffee at the counter. I changed into my pale blue uniform in the employee bathroom, splashing cold water on my face before pinning my name tag in place. As I worked, refilling coffee cups and taking orders, my mind kept drifting to what lay ahead. I'd need to be firm but gentle, clear but compassionate. I couldn't let my hurt override the purpose of tomorrow's journey. Around 5:30, a familiar face appeared at the counter. James Wilson, a retired English professor who came in every Thursday for the meatloaf special. He'd been a regular since before I started working here, always with a book and a kind word. "The usual, Professor?" I asked, already reaching for the coffee pot. He smiled, his weathered face crinkling around the eyes. "You know me too well, Sarah." As I poured his coffee, he studied my face. "Something troubling you today?" I hesitated, then set down the pot. "Can I ask you something, Professor? You taught for what, 40 years? 42, he corrected gently. "Did you ever have students who—" I searched for the right words. "Who couldn't see the value in what they had? Who thought having less meant being less?" He considered this, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "More than I can count. It's a common affliction in a culture that measures success in dollars and followers." He looked up at me. "Is this about Lily?" I nodded, my throat suddenly tight. "Adolescence is when we try on different versions of ourselves," he said. "Sometimes the personas they adopt are reactions against what they value most deeply, because those are also the things that frighten them." "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said gently, "that Lily has watched you struggle and sacrifice for years. She's seen what that cost you. Perhaps what looks like ingratitude is really fear that your life is her destiny. Fear that trying and failing is worse than not trying at all." His words hit me with the force of revelation. I'd been so focused on Lily's seeming contempt that I hadn't considered it might mask something deeper, anxiety about her own future, terror that hard work might not be enough in a world that seemed increasingly stacked against those who started with less. "What would you do?" I asked. He sipped his coffee before answering. "I'd show her the truth. All of it, the struggles and the triumphs, the setbacks and the small victories. I'd help her see that a life of integrity, even a difficult one, has a richness that can't be measured in material terms." It was exactly what I'd planned, but hearing it from him gave me confidence that I wasn't overreacting. The dinner rush began, and I lost myself in the rhythm of orders and plates and checks. At precisely 6:15, Mrs. Parker's SUV pulled into the parking lot. I watched through the window as Lily climbed out, backpack slung over one shoulder, face set in the carefully bored expression she'd perfected lately. "Thanks for the ride, Mrs. P," she called, then turned toward the diner's entrance. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. For the next hour, I'd be just her mother working her second job. The real test would come tomorrow. The bell above the door jingled as she entered. She spotted me immediately and made her way to an empty booth near the back, as far from the counter as possible. I noticed her glance around first, checking if any of her classmates might see her here. "Hey," she said as I approached with a menu she didn't need. She'd been coming here since she was in elementary school. "How much longer do you have to work?" "Till closing," I said. "There's leftover lasagna in the fridge. Mrs. Parker said you have a big debate tournament this weekend." She nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. "Yeah, we're going to Springfield. Coach thinks we have a shot at state this year." I felt a surge of pride despite everything. Lily had always been a gifted speaker, passionate and articulate. I'd spent hours helping her practice in our living room, playing devil's advocate to sharpen her arguments. "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. "Listen, tomorrow after school, I need you to come straight here instead of going home." I've already cleared it with Mrs. Parker. Now she looked up, suspicious. "Why? Do I have a doctor's appointment or something?" "No," I said, keeping my voice level. "We're taking a field trip, you and I." "A field trip?" "Mom, I'm 17, not 7. "I'm aware," I said dryly. "Humor me. It's important." She studied my face, perhaps trying to determine if this was negotiable. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her it wasn't. "Fine," she sighed, with the exaggerated patience of the long-suffering. "Can I get a chocolate shake while I wait? Since I'm stuck here and all." "Coming right up," I said, turning back toward the kitchen before she could see the tears threatening to spill over. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. The unexpected surprise the next day dawned clear and cool, sunlight streaming through my bedroom window as I prepared for what lay ahead. I'd arranged for Diane to cover my shift at Miller's and had taken a rare personal day from the hospital. In 12 years, I could count on one hand the number of days I'd taken off for anything other than Lily's illnesses or school events. I dressed with purposed jeans, my most comfortable walking shoes, and a faded Boston University sweatshirt I hadn't worn in years. I'd purchased it on my campus visit before life had taken its unexpected turn. It still fit, more or less. I made breakfast, scrambled eggs and wheat toast, and left a note for Lily reminding her to come to the diner after school. Then I set out to prepare for our journey. My first stop was the bank on Main Street. Gloria, the branch manager, waved me over to her desk when I entered. "Sarah, don't usually see you on Fridays. Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I assured her. "I just need to make a withdrawal from my savings account." Her eyebrows rose slightly as I wrote the amount on the slip, $200, more cash than I typically carried. "Special occasion?" "You could say that," I replied. "A bit of an educational experiment with Lily." Gloria nodded understandingly. She'd known us since Lily was a toddler, had seen us through the worst of the divorce. "That girl's lucky to have you, Sarah. Not that teenagers ever realize how good they have it. If only she knew." Next, I drove to Evergreen Storage on the edge of town. I hadn't been here in years, not since we'd moved into our house and no longer needed the extra space. The manager, a new guy I didn't recognize, looked up my unit and handed me the key with barely a glance. Unit 217 smelled musty when I rolled up the door. Dust motes danced in the shaft of light that illuminated the sparse contents, a few boxes, Mark's old drafting table that I couldn't bring myself to sell, and in the back corner, covered with a sheet, the item I'd come for. I pulled off the sheet, revealing my mother's old cedar hope chest. She'd given it to me when I married Mark, filled with handmade quilts and family heirlooms. Most of those were now in our home, but the chest itself had been too large for our apartment after the divorce. I'd stored it here, using it to safeguard the physical remnants of our family history that I couldn't bear to part with but had no space to display. It took some effort to maneuver it into my car, the wood scraping against my hands as I pushed it into the back seat. But I managed, just as I'd managed everything else life had thrown my way. My third stop was Ferguson's Hardware. Old Mr. Ferguson himself was behind the counter, his white hair thin, but his handshake still strong. "Sarah Reynolds. Haven't seen you since you fixed that leaky faucet. How'd that turn out, by the way?" "Still holding," I said with a smile. "You were right about the washer being the problem." He beamed, clearly pleased his advice had helped. "What can I do for you today?" "I need a few things," I said, handing him my list. "And wondering if I could trouble you for a favor?" By the time I left Ferguson's, it was nearly noon. I drove to the cemetery on the hill overlooking town, parking near the east entrance closest to my mother's grave. I hadn't visited in months, too busy, always too busy, but today her guidance felt essential. I sat on the small bench beside her headstone, the grass around it neatly trimmed. "I hope I'm doing the right thing, Mom," I said softly. "I don't want to lose her." The only answer was the whisper of wind through the nearby maple trees, but somehow I felt steadier as I left, more certain of my path. My final errand was at Lily's old elementary school. Principal Matthews had been surprised by my request, but had agreed readily enough. She was always a special student, he'd said. I'd be happy to help. By 3:30, I was back at Miller's, not in my waitress uniform, but in my regular clothes. Diane gave me a thumbs up from behind the counter. All set? I nodded. Thanks again for covering. Please. After you worked Christmas so I could see my grandkids? This is nothing. I settled into a booth by the window to wait, my overnight bag, and a few other items stashed in my car. When Mrs. Parker's SUV pulled up at 3:45, I took a deep, steadying breath. Lily bounced in, looking annoyed but also curious despite herself. Her honey blonde hair, Mark's hair, was pulled back in a messy bun, her debate team hoodie unzipped over a plain white t-shirt. Okay, I'm here, she announced, sliding into the booth opposite me. What's this field trip about? And why aren't you working? I took the day off, I said. She blinked in genuine surprise. You never take days off. Today is special. I studied her face, the stubborn set of her jaw so like my own, the faint sprinkle of freckles across her nose, the clear blue eyes that could still sometimes look at the world with wonder when she forgot to be cynical. We're going on a journey, you and I. She fidgeted with the salt shaker. Mom, seriously, I have a ton of homework and debate prep for the tournament. This is more important, I said firmly. Your homework will still be there tomorrow. She must have heard something in my voice, because she stopped fidgeting and looked at me properly for the first time. Are you okay? Are you sick or something? The worry in her voice touched me. Despite everything, she did care. I'm fine. This isn't about my health. It's about our family. Did something happen with Dad? She asked, suddenly alert. No, nothing like that. I reached across the table and took her hand. Lily, the other night, I heard what you said to Zoe. About me being a loser. Her face went pale, then flushed crimson. Her eyes dropped to the table. Mom, I didn't mean. I think you did, I said quietly. And that's okay. You're entitled to your feelings and perceptions. But I wonder if those perceptions are based on the whole truth, or just the parts of it you've seen. She wouldn't look at me, her free hand now fidgeting with her hoodie strings. So today, I'm going to show you the rest of the story, I continued. Our story. Where we came from, how we got here, and maybe, where we might go next. Finally, she met my eyes. Is this some kind of punishment? I shook my head. No, honey. It's an invitation to understand. Will you accept it? For a long moment, she just looked at me. I could see the calculations running behind her eyes, how much trouble she'd be in if she refused, whether giving in now would get this over with faster. Finally, she sighed. Do I have a choice? We always have choices, I said. That's part of what today is about. But I hope you'll choose to come with me with an open mind and heart. Another sigh, more theatrical this time. Fine, let's get this over with. I nodded, accepting her grudging agreement for what it was. Great. First stop is the car. I have something to show you. Outside, I popped the trunk to reveal the cedar chest. Lily frowned. Is that Grandma's old chest? It is. Help me carry it inside. Together, we lugged it back into the diner. Diane had reserved the small back room where they sometimes hosted private parties. A pot of coffee and some water glasses were already set up on the table. Take a seat, I told Lily as I positioned the chest in the corner. This is where our journey begins. I unlocked the chest and began laying items on the table between us. My high school yearbook. The acceptance letters. Photos of a much younger me in my nursing school scrubs. Marks and my wedding album. Hospital bracelets from the day Lily was born. What is all this? She asked, her voice uncertain now. This is the beginning, I said. Our beginning. Before you judge where we are now, I want you to understand how we got here. And why. I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table to her. Inside was the itinerary I'd prepared, laying out our journey for the next 24 hours. Lily opened it slowly, her eyes widening as she scanned the contents. Mom, this is a little intense? I suggested with a small smile. Maybe. But so is calling your mother a loser behind her back." Her face flushed again, but she didn't argue. Instead, she looked back at the paper in her hands, then up at me with a mix of wariness and reluctant curiosity. "Okay," she said finally. "Where do we start?" I smiled, feeling the first flicker of hope. "We start at the beginning, with who I was before I was your mom." And with that, I opened the yearbook to a page I'd marked, a photo of a teenage girl with dreams as big as her hair, standing proudly beside a science project that had won state recognition. A girl who'd had no idea what life had in store for her, but was ready to take on the world regardless. A girl who, in many ways, was a lot like Lily herself. Lessons in the journey for the next 2 hours, we sat in that back room of Miller's diner while I walked Lily through the first chapters of our story. I showed her newspaper clippings of my academic achievements, explained how I'd worked after school at the local pharmacy to save for college, told her about the scholarship offers and my dreams of becoming a nurse practitioner. "You were going to all these schools?" she asked, handling the acceptance letters with newfound respect. I had no idea. I confirmed. Northwestern was my first choice. I'd already sent in my deposit when I found out I was pregnant with you. Her face fell slightly. "So I ruined your plans." I reached across the table to cover her hand with mine. "No, you changed them. There's a difference." I showed her photos of Mark and me in our first apartment, barely more than kids ourselves, but so full of hope. I didn't sugarcoat the truth, how Mark had struggled after his father's death, how his grief had spiraled into addiction and financial irresponsibility, how I tried to hold everything together until I couldn't anymore. "Your father isn't a villain in this story," I told her firmly. "He's a man who lost his way and hasn't quite found it again. The presents he sends, they're his way of trying to be part of your life when he doesn't know how to be fully present in it." I could see her processing this, reconciling this version of her father with the one she'd constructed from fragments of memory and sporadic contact. "Why are you telling me all this now?" she asked. "Because you're old enough to understand," I said simply. "And because you need to know that our circumstances aren't the result of failure or a lack of ambition. They're the result of choices made in response to challenges we didn't choose." By then it was nearing 6 p.m. I packed up the memorabilia, leaving most of it in the chest, but tucking a few key items into my bag. "Where to now?" Lily asked, her initial resistance softened by curiosity. Now we see where our journey really began. I led her out to the car, where I'd already loaded my overnight bag and a few other necessities. "We're going to Maple Street." The drive took less than 15 minutes. Maple Street was in the oldest part of town, lined with once grand Victorian homes now mostly converted to apartments. I parked in front of number 237, a 3-story blue house with a sagging porch and peeling paint. "What is this place?" Lily asked as we got out. "This is where we lived after your father left," I said. "3rd floor, back apartment. 1 bedroom, shared bathroom down the hall." Her eyes widened as she looked up at the dilapidated building. "We lived here?" "I don't remember it. You were 4 when we moved in, 6 when we left. But this was home for 2 critical years. I'd arranged everything in advance." Mrs. Petrovich, the landlady, still owned the building and remembered us fondly. She'd agreed to let us see the old apartment, which was currently between tenants. The stairs creaked under our feet as we climbed to the 3rd floor. The hallway smelled of cabbage and disinfectant, just as it had 12 years ago. Mrs. Petrovich met us at the top, keys in hand, her Eastern European accent as thick as ever. "Sarah." And little Lily, not so little anymore. She enveloped us both in a bone-crushing hug that smelled of floral perfume. Come, all ready for you." The apartment was smaller than I remembered, a single room with a kitchenette in one corner and a closet-sized space that had served as our bedroom. The walls had been repainted, but otherwise it looked much the same. "This was our first home on our own," I told Lily. "We shared the pull-out couch, you on the inside, me on the outside to make sure you didn't fall." She walked slowly around the perimeter, taking it in. "It's so small." It was what we could afford on my salary from the convenience store. I was working there during the day and taking online classes at night after you were asleep. I pointed to a water stain on the ceiling. That leak was there when we lived here too. Every time it rained, I'd put a pot under it and pray it wouldn't get worse because we couldn't afford to move and had nowhere else to go. Mrs. Petrovich, who had been hovering in the doorway, chimed in. Your mama, she fixed many things herself. Learn from library books. Save me money, so I give little break on rent. I smiled at the memory. Mrs. Petrovich taught me how to patch plaster and replace a faucet. Skills I still use today. And you babysit my grandchildren when I need, Mrs. Petrovich added, nodding at Lily. You were good girl. Quiet. Always with book. I opened my bag and pulled out a photograph, handing it to Lily. It showed the two of us sitting on the very same windowsill, a Christmas tree made of paper decorations taped to the wall behind us. Remember those paper chains we used to make? And the snowflakes from coffee filters? She studied the photo, her expression unreadable. I think so. Maybe. I thanked Mrs. Petrovich. And we headed back to the car. Our next stop was just a few blocks away, West Side Food Bank. Why are we here? Lily asked as we parked. This place kept us fed during our hardest times, I explained. And now we're going to help keep others fed. Inside, Mr. Washington, the director, greeted us warmly. I'd called ahead, and he'd set up a volunteer station for us. For the next hour, we sorted donations and packed boxes for distribution. I watched Lily's initial reluctance give way to focus as she worked, carefully checking expiration dates and organizing items by category. You've been here before? She asked during a brief break. I nodded, both as a recipient and a volunteer. When things got better for us, I started giving back one Saturday a month. I still try to, though it's been harder to find the time lately. Why didn't I know that? You were usually at soccer practice or a friend's house. And honestly, I didn't want you to feel embarrassed. Maybe that was a mistake. Our next stop was Jefferson Elementary, Lily's old school. Principal Matthews had left a key for us with the night custodian. The building was quiet at this hour, our footsteps echoing in the empty hallways. I led Lily to the small nurse's office next to the administration area. This is where I got my foot back in the healthcare door, I told her. Volunteering as a health aide 3 mornings a week while you were in class. No pay, but it kept my basic skills current and eventually led to a recommendation for the CNA program at Riverside. We visited the cafeteria where I'd worked serving lunch for minimum wage and the classroom where I'd been a reading tutor. Each stop on our tour represented a small step forward, a building block in the life we now had. Outside, the spring evening was turning cool. Lily zipped up her hoodie as we walked back to the car. There's one more important place we need to visit, I said. But it's a bit of a drive. Are you hungry? She nodded, and I handed her a paper bag from the front seat. Inside were sandwiches I'd prepared that morning, peanut butter and banana, her childhood favorite. Really, Mom? PB and banana. I smiled. Some things never change. As we drove out of town toward the county hospital in neighboring Glenville, I told her about the months after I'd finally saved enough for us to move out of the Maple Street apartment. We lived in that duplex on Elm for almost 3 years. Remember Mrs. Kravitz next door with all the cats? She watched you after school while I did my CNA training. I remember the cats, Lily said with a small smile. One of them had 6 toes. That was Hemingway, I laughed. Mrs. K was convinced he was descended from Ernest Hemingway's famous polydactyl cats. The county hospital loomed ahead, its windows glowing in the twilight. I parked in the visitor's lot and turned to Lily. This is where I took my CNA exam, I explained, and where I worked the overnight shift for 18 months before I got the day position at Riverside. You work nights? She sounded surprised. But you were always there when I woke up for school. I worked 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., came home to get you ready for school, slept while you were in class, then picked you up and spent the evening with you before Mrs. Kravitz came over so I could go back to work. Her brow furrowed. When did you sleep? In chunks. For hours here, 3 there. It wasn't ideal, but it paid better than the convenience store, and it was a step toward my original goal. We didn't go inside the hospital, just sat in the car looking at it, the building where I'd spent so many exhausted hours caring for patients while worrying about making rent. Why are you showing me all this? Lily asked finally, her voice smaller than usual. Because I want you to understand that where we are now, our house, your school, the life we've built, it didn't happen by accident or by settling for less. It happened through hundreds of small choices and sacrifices, day after day, year after year. The final stop on our journey that night was the Sunrise Motel on Route 16. It wasn't much to look at, a single-story building with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign, but I'd reserved a room for us. "We're staying here?" Lily asked, looking dubious as I parked. "Just for tonight," I assured her. "There's a reason." The room was basic but clean: 2 single beds, a small bathroom, a TV bolted to the dresser. I set down our overnight bags while Lily explored the limited space. "I don't get it," she said. "Why here?" I sat on one of the beds and patted the space beside me. When she joined me, I pulled out the last photograph I wanted to show her that day, a faded Polaroid of the very same motel, dated 16 years earlier. "This is where I stayed the night I found out I was pregnant with you," I said softly. I was so scared and confused. I'd just gotten all those acceptance letters, had my whole future planned out. I drove here to think, to decide what to do next. She stared at the photo, then at me, her eyes wide. "That night, I made the most important decision of my life," I continued. "I chose you. Not just to have you, but to make you the center of my world, to build my life around giving you the best future I possibly could." I took her hand in mine. Every job, every apartment, every late night and early morning since then has been part of that choice. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because you are the best thing that ever happened to me, the most important thing I've ever done. I watched her process this, saw the subtle shifts in her expression as pieces fell into place. "I never knew," she said finally. "I never thought about all of it. How hard it was." "You weren't supposed to," I told her gently. "My job was to carry those burdens so you wouldn't have to. But now that you're almost grown, I think it's time you understood the full story of how we got here." She was quiet for a long time, looking down at our joined hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry about what I said. About you being a loser. I didn't mean it." "I know," I said, though the words had cut deeper than she could know. "But why did you say it?" She shrugged, uncomfortable. "I don't know. Zoe was talking about her mom's promotion and their trip to Europe this summer. It just came out. Because our life seems small by comparison?" She nodded reluctantly. "Tomorrow, I promised, I'll show you just how big it actually is." The new beginning. We both slept fitfully that night, the motel bed too firm, the heating unit too loud as it cycled on and off. I woke before dawn, watching the slow rise and fall of Lily's breathing in the next bed, remembering countless nights I'd done the same when she was small, checking on her during asthma flare-ups, or simply reassuring myself that she was safe and well. When had I stopped doing that? Somewhere along the way, as she grew more independent and I grew more exhausted, those quiet moments of connection had slipped away. Perhaps that was part of the problem. We'd been living parallel lives under the same roof, each absorbed in our own struggles and aspirations, failing to see how deeply intertwined they remained. I showered and dressed quietly, not wanting to wake her yet. Today would be another full day, and she needed her rest. Outside, the sky was lightening to a pale pearl gray, the air crisp with early spring. I walked to the motel office where a coffee maker was set up for guests, pouring 2 cups and doctoring Lily's with the cream and sugar she preferred. When I returned, she was sitting up in bed, hair tousled, scrolling through her phone. "No service," she grumbled, setting it aside. "One of the perks of this place," I said, handing her the coffee, "forces you to be present." She took a sip and made a face. "This is terrible." "Also one of the perks," I smiled. "Builds character." That earned me an eye roll, but there was less animosity in it than usual. Progress of sorts. We checked out by 7 and drove to Bailey's Diner on the highway, not to be confused with Miller's back home. This Bailey's was a truck stop, catering to long-haul drivers and travelers passing through. The parking lot was already half full of semis, their engines rumbling in the morning quiet. "Why are we here?" Lily asked as we found a booth by the window. Breakfast, I said simply. And the next part of our story. A waitress about my age approached, coffee pot in hand. Her name tag read, Shannon, and her smile widened in recognition when she saw me. Well, look what the cat dragged in. Sarah Reynolds, it's been years. I stood to hug her. Shannon, you're still here. Where else would I be? Assistant manager now. Thank you very much. She turned to Lily with interest. And this must be your girl. Last time I saw you, you were about this high. She held her hand at waist level. Shannon and I worked here together, I explained to Lily. After we left the apartment on Maple Street, before I started at the county hospital. Your mom was the best server we ever had, Shannon told Lily. Customers would request her section, leave her these crazy tips. What was that one, Sarah? The guy with the cowboy hat? $200 on a $15 check, I recalled. I thought he'd made a mistake, tried to give it back. He said his wife had just come through cancer treatment at the university hospital, and her nurse had been so kind to them. Said he was paying it forward. That money was the last bit we needed for the security deposit on the Elm Street duplex, I told Lily. Got us out of Maple Street 6 months earlier than I'd planned. Shannon took our orders, blueberry pancakes for Lily, eggs and toast for me, before hurrying off to greet another table. Did you work everywhere in this town? Lily asked, a hint of incredulity in her voice. Pretty much, I admitted. Sometimes 2 or 3 places at once. Whatever it took to keep us moving forward. Over breakfast, I shared more stories from those early years, the regular customers who'd brightened difficult days, the coworkers who'd covered shifts when Lily was sick, the small kindnesses that had sustained us when resources were scarce. The thing is, I told her, we were never alone in this journey. There's been a community supporting us every step of the way. People who saw our potential and invested in it, not with money, but with opportunity and flexibility and faith. After breakfast, we hit the road again. Our next stop was Riverside Community College, where I'd taken night classes toward my nursing prerequisites whenever we could afford the tuition. The campus was quiet on a Saturday morning, just a few students hurrying to weekend labs or study groups. We walked the paths between red brick buildings, and I pointed out the classrooms where I'd studied anatomy and physiology, the bench where I'd reviewed flashcards during lunch breaks, the library where I'd sometimes brought Lily with coloring books while I used the computers to write papers. I didn't know you went here, she said. 9 credits, I told her. That's all I managed to complete before life threw us another curveball. What happened? The transmission went out in our car. The choice was fixing it or finishing the semester. We needed the car to get to work and your school, so... She was quiet, processing this. But you never went back? Not yet, I corrected. I've taken a few more classes online since then. I'm still 18 credits shy of what I need to apply to the BSN program. You still want to do that? Become a full nurse? Of course. I smiled at her surprise. Dreams don't disappear, Lily. Sometimes they just wait until the time is right. Our next destination was across town, the administrative offices of Lakeside Nursing and Rehabilitation Center. The weekend receptionist buzzed us in, recognizing me with a wave. Miss Torres is expecting you, she said, pointing down the hall. Elena Torres, the director of nursing, was waiting in her office. She rose to greet us with a warm smile, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. Sarah, right on time as always. She shook my hand, then Lily's. And this must be the famous Lily. I've heard so much about you. Ms. Torres was my first clinical supervisor, I explained. And she's got an interesting proposition for us. Elena gestured for us to sit. As I mentioned on the phone, Sarah, we're expanding our scholarship program for CNAs who want to complete their nursing degrees. The foundation has earmarked funds specifically for single parents with demonstrated work ethic and commitment to the field. She slid a folder across the desk to me. Full tuition for the BSN program at Riverside, plus a stipend for books and a part-time position here with flexible hours built around your class schedule. We'd ask for a 3-year commitment to work at Lakeside after graduation, but at full RN salary and benefits. I opened the folder, though I'd already read the details when Elena had called earlier in the week. It was an incredible opportunity, the chance to finally complete the journey I'd started nearly 2 decades ago. "You're offering this to my mom?" Lily asked, her voice tinged with awe. Elena nodded. "Your mother has a reputation in the healthcare community for exceptional patient care and unparalleled work ethic. We've been trying to recruit her for years." "Why didn't you tell me about this?" Lily asked me. "Because until yesterday I wasn't sure I could accept it," I said. "It would mean changes for both of us. I'd have less time at home, more hours studying. We'd have to budget even more carefully during the transition. But you'd be a real nurse," she said, "with a degree and everything." "I'd be an RN instead of a CNA," I corrected gently. "The work I do now is real nursing too, just with different limitations." Elena excused herself to give us privacy, and I turned to face Lily directly. "This is why I brought you here today," I said. "To show you that our story isn't over. That the sacrifices weren't just about survival, they were investments in a future that's still unfolding. That being a single mom working 2 jobs doesn't make me a loser. It makes me someone who plays the long game." Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I don't think you're a loser, Mom." "I never really did." "Then why say it?" She looked down at her hands. "Because sometimes I'm afraid that's what I'll be. That no matter how hard I work or what I do, I'll end up struggling like." She trailed off. "Like me, I finished for her." She nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "Lily, look at me." I waited until she did. "If you end up like me, someone who faces challenges head-on, who doesn't give up on her dreams even when the path gets complicated, who builds a life of purpose and integrity, I would consider that a tremendous success." Outside, the spring sun had broken through the morning clouds, casting long shadows across the parking lot. We walked to the car in silence, both lost in thought. Our final stop was Ferguson's Hardware. Old Mr. Ferguson was waiting for us, just as we'd arranged. "Right on time," he said, ushering us through the store to the workshop and back. There on the workbench sat my mother's cedar chest, its surface now gleaming with fresh polish, the damaged corner skillfully repaired. "It's beautiful," I breathed, running my hand over the smooth wood. "Just needed a little TLC," Mr. Ferguson said modestly. "Cedar's resilient. Scratches and dents don't change its essential nature." I thanked him, and together Lily and I loaded the chest back into the car. The drive home was quiet, both of us processing the events of the past 24 hours. As we turned onto Cherry Oak Lane, I glanced at Lily. "One last surprise," I said, pulling into our driveway. Inside, I led her to the small second bedroom that had served as a catch-all storage space for years. The door was closed, and I gestured for her to open it. She gasped when she did. The room had been transformed. Gone were the boxes of holiday decorations and outgrown clothes. In their place was a simple desk by the window, a comfortable chair, and empty bookshelves lining one wall. A small coffee maker sat on a side table, alongside a decorative mug that read "Future Lawyer," a nod to her debate team success and often-stated career aspiration. "What is this?" she asked, turning in a circle to take it all in. "This is your study," I said. "I know you'll be heading to college in a little over a year, but until then, I thought you deserved a proper space to work, one that reflects your potential and priorities." "When did you do all this?" "Last weekend, while you were at Zoe's. Mr. Alvarez from next door helped me move the heavy stuff." "The desk was your grandmother's. It was in our storage unit along with her chest." She ran her hand over the desk's surface, much as I had touched the cedar chest earlier. "It's perfect." "There's more," I said. I opened the desk drawer and took out a folder similar to the one Elena had given me. "This is for you." Inside was information about a summer internship with Judge Myers at the county courthouse, an opportunity typically reserved for college students. But the judge had agreed to make an exception for Lily after seeing her debate team performance at a recent competition. "How did you?" "Judge Myers' son was a patient at Riverside last month. We got talking about you and your interest in law. One thing led to another." Lily stared at the internship details, then back at me. "Why are you doing all this?" After what I said, I took her hands in mine. "Because that's what parents do, Lily. We keep believing in our children, keep investing in their futures, even when they don't fully see or appreciate the effort." Not for gratitude or recognition, but because that's what love looks like in action. I led her to the living room, where we sat together on the couch, the same second-hand couch she'd been on with Zoe that fateful night. "I need you to understand something," I said. "The life we have might look small or inadequate compared to your friends. We don't take exotic vacations or drive new cars. But what we have is something money can't buy: resilience, determination, and the knowledge that we can weather any storm together." Lily was quiet for a long moment, then said, "I think I understand now. Or I'm starting to, anyway. That's all I ask," I told her. "That you keep an open mind about what success really looks like. That you judge people, including yourself and me, by the obstacles they've overcome, not just the finish line they've crossed." She nodded, then surprised me by leaning over to rest her head on my shoulder, something she hadn't done in years. "Mom," she said softly. "Yes. Are you going to take that scholarship? Become an RN?" I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "I think I am. If you're okay with the changes it will bring." "I think it's time," she said. "For both of us." We sat there as afternoon faded toward evening, the weight between us lighter than it had been in years. Not everything was resolved. There would still be moments of teenage attitude and maternal overprotectiveness, still struggles and misunderstandings ahead. But something fundamental had shifted, a new foundation laid on which we could build the next chapter of our story. A story that, despite its hardships and detours, was ultimately one of triumph, not because we had conquered every obstacle, but because we had refused to be defined by them. Because we had chosen, again and again, to keep moving forward with grace and determination. Together.